Driver, hands on the wheel. This is your final warning. The voice blasted through the cruiser PA, sharp and commanding. Red and blue lights streaked across wet asphalt, flaring against the side of the black sedan. Trooper Trevor Walsh stepped out, hand resting on his holster, badge number 742 catching every flash of light. His expression didn't ask questions, it delivered judgment. Do not reach for anything. Don't even blink unless I tell you to, he said, rapping the glass with 2 firm taps. Inside, Dr. Nadine Price kept both hands on the steering wheel. Steady posture, controlled breathing. Her eyes didn't waver. I am fully compliant, she said. Please state the lawful basis for this stop. Lawful basis? Walsh scoffed. You were doing 82 and a 45. That's all the basis I need. I've been in cruise control at 50 for the last 12 minutes, Nadine replied. Your dash cam will verify, as will your ALPR ping at 2341. 0 violations flagged. Walsh moved closer. The red recording light on AXONBC 742A blinked across his vest. When I say get out, you get out. We're done talking. I have not refused, she said. I am asking you to cite the statute authorizing forced vehicle removal absent articulable suspicion. His tone sharpened. My suspicion is that you're about to make things worse. Window down, all the way. She lowered it exactly 2 inches. More, he snapped. 2 inches is compliant with departmental policy, she said. It ensures safety for both parties. Walsh lifted his flashlight and held the beam steady in her eyes. You quoting videos now? Think you're educated? I'm quoting your agency's procedure manual, she answered. The road hummed with passing trucks. Walsh's grip on the flashlight tightened. He glanced at her registration on the dash but made no move to take it. You hiding something? He asked. You making this difficult for a reason? No, she replied, calm, unwavering. But you are creating conditions of unlawful escalation. This interaction is being recorded. His jaw flexed. The radio cracked through the night. Unit 7-4-2, status check. Need backup? Walsh pressed his mic. Affirmative. Code 6. Driver is non-compliant. Possible obstruction. The cruiser headlights washed over Nadine's face. Raindrops shimmered along the window edge. The dashcam, SHPC2-D15-Unit 742, logged it all. 234108, US 19 North, mile marker 147. Walsh took one deliberate step back. Last warning, exit the vehicle. Now Nadine stayed motionless, controlled, present. Trooper Walsh, she said, every word clear. State for the record whether you are initiating a discretionary exit under Section 3.4 of the Vehicle Stop and Search Directive. Walsh froze for a breath. His hand dropped toward his holster. And in the distance, sirens began to rise. Driver, open this door or I'll drag you out myself. Walsh's voice raised now, not just to her but to the road itself. Passing cars slowed. A window rolled down. Someone held up a phone. Nadine spoke clearly, keeping her gaze forward. Trooper, you are escalating without cause. I am not refusing. I am invoking procedural compliance. Walsh slammed his palm on the glass. Stop talking like you're in a courtroom. You're on the side of the road and I decide how this goes. Headlights swept over them as another car crept by. A voice from the passing vehicle shouted, Yo, she didn't do anything! The shout wasn't loud, but it echoed with permission, for others to watch, to judge. Walsh turned toward the witness. Keep moving unless you want to be detained, too. Nadine didn't flinch. Your body cam is active, Trooper Walsh. So is your dash cam, and you've already declared a Code 6 investigative hold without stating suspicion. He leaned in, voice hot. Suspicion? Here's my suspicion. You're acting above your station. You think your words protect you? They don't. My authority does. Her tone remained steady. Authority is limited by statute. Badge number 742, District C2. All recorded. Backup arrived fully now, the second trooper, Officer Kellum, circling around her passenger side. He tapped his baton against the door, a deliberate intimidation rhythm. "Step out," Kellum shouted. "This is your last chance." Nadine kept still. "You are violating exit protocol under Section 3.4. I am not a threat." Walsh laughed loud enough for the bystanders to hear. "Not a threat? Lady, tonight you'll learn what a real threat looks like when you test law enforcement." Another phone appeared. Someone whispered, "This is gonna go viral." Walsh stepped back, hand resting on his holster. And in the flicker of rotating lights his expression shifted, from arrogance to calculation, as the third cruiser's siren screamed into range. A burst of static cut across the patrol radios, sharp, unexpected. "Dispatch to Unit 742. Be advised. Driver inquiry flagged under discretionary review protocol. All actions now subject to immediate oversight logging." The words echoed through both cruisers. Nadine's eyes didn't move, but the message had landed. Oversight logging. That meant body cam uploads were going live, not stored locally. Every second was now being mirrored to a federal database. Walsh didn't acknowledge the call. His jaw clenched once before he hit his mic. "Dispatch. Repeat last." "Affirmative," the dispatcher said. "This stop is now in compliance monitoring mode." Additional units notified. A bystander near the shoulder lowered his phone from his face, then raised it higher, now steady, deliberate. Another car slowed, hazard lights flicking on as it pulled to the side. Nadine spoke, voice calm, clear, deliberately audible for the camera. "Trooper Walsh, please confirm for the record that this stop has entered compliance oversight. Your actions are under direct review." Walsh didn't respond. Instead, he stepped toward the cruiser, leaned in through the driver's side door and turned slightly away, trying to shield his mic. The attempt itself drew attention. Sirens in the distance grew louder. Not urgent sirens, transport sirens, administrative vehicles. The dispatcher's voice came through again, this time louder, patched to speaker. "Attention all units, oversight logging active." Officers are reminded their conduct is subject to immediate public request under transparency statutes. A ripple of tension moved through the scene. Drivers watching from the shoulder lifted their phones in unison. For the first time since the stop began, the balance of power shifted. Just slightly, but visibly. And in that moment, every viewer knew, this isn't just a traffic stop, this is evidence. The clock on the dashboard read 10:57 p.m. Dr. Nadine Price glanced at the sealed envelope resting in the passenger seat. Heavy cardstock bearing the state court insignia. A red security strip ran across the flap, signed in ink. Beneath it, a secondary label, filed under emergency provision, Title 42, Civil Rights Action. She pressed her Bluetooth earpiece. "Clerk Harmon, this is Price. I am 23 miles out. Confirming the exhibit box is still accessible." The clerk's voice came through, tired but alert. "Affirmative. Drop-off slot seals at midnight. As long as you're here before 12, it's clocked for today's record." "It will be," she replied. Her eyes returned to the road, steady, unwavering. The state highway stretched ahead beneath a dark sweep of clouds. The pavement shimmered faintly from earlier rain, reflecting the occasional passing car. A calm quiet settled in the cabin, broken only by the steady click of cruise control. These weren't just documents. They were sworn affidavits from officers willing to break silence on unlawful traffic stops, cases suppressed under procedural discretion. If the filings made it into the docket before midnight, injunction proceedings would trigger automatically. Delayed by even 1 minute, the cases would roll into the next term, giving the Highway Patrol 30 additional days to continue stops under the old directive. 30 days meant thousands more pulled over, more lives upended. The stakes were not abstract. Nadine tapped her earpiece again. "Harmon, prepare the timestamp log. I'll be using federal courier credentials. You're expecting pushback?" "I'm expecting resistance," she said, "and resistance confirms necessity." She ended the call and adjusted the envelope, aligning it perfectly with the dashboard seam, an unconscious habit. Everything in her life was built on precision. She had drafted the very doctrines that governed roadside detentions. Tonight, she wasn't just delivering exhibits, she was enforcing the law she had written. A green highway sign loomed ahead. District C2, 12 miles. And beneath it, a smaller panel. Enhanced Enforcement Zone. State Highway Patrol, active. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined Nadine's office, each binder labeled with statute numbers, case citations, and enforcement matrices. One entire section was dedicated to a single initiative, VSSD-12.8.1, Vehicle Stop and Search Directive. Her name appeared beneath the header on every draft, listed not as contributor, but as primary architect. She stepped inside just hours earlier, retrieving the sealed exhibit packet. The motion-triggered lights hummed to life, illuminating framed legal orders. One bore the seal of the State Oversight Commission, recognizing her for distinguished contribution to civil rights enforcement. Another, from the United States Court of Appeals, commended her advisory authorship in a landmark consent decree. Her assistant, Vanya, had stood by the door, holding a stack of printed reports. The compliance numbers dropped again, Vanya said. District C2 logged a 42% spike in discretionary stops since last quarter. Discretionary? Nadine asked, placing the sealed envelope precisely at center on her desk. Vanya nodded. No contraband recovered in 87% of those stops, mostly citation only. High minority impact. Pattern established, Nadine said. That's enough to trigger pre-enforcement review. Vanya hesitated. If you submit these exhibits tonight, the injunction hits in 48 hours. You'll be locking the patrol's hands statewide. Nadine met her eyes. Then their hands should not have been where they are. She lifted a slim black access card from her desk drawer, embossed with an eagle crest and the words Civil Remedies Bureau, Policy Division. This was not a typical legal credential. It granted direct interface with federal compliance audits. Vanya lowered her voice. You know they're watching this office. They should be, Nadine replied calmly. Transparency is part of the decree. She slid the access card into the red sleeve, sealing it alongside the exhibit documents. Her authority wasn't inferred by reputation. It was codified in law. As she exited the office, the security panel blinked. User, price, M. Level 5 access, federal underside enabled. The system did not question her identity, but on the highway, those who stopped her soon would. The overhead lights in the corridor flickered on as Nadine entered the secure records wing earlier that evening. At the end of the hall, a biometric scanner waited, an iris recognition panel bordered by federal compliance warnings. She paused, steady, and placed her palm to the access plate. Identity confirmed. Federal mandate status, active. The words glowed across the display, followed by a reminder banner. Failure to submit exhibits by statutory deadline constitutes breach of enforcement oath. Violations are subject to disciplinary review under federal authority. This wasn't an advisory. It was a binding obligation, one she had accepted willingly. Vanya had walked beside her, quiet now. Most attorneys wouldn't take this on personally, she said. They'd file through staff or request an extension. There is no extension, Nadine replied. The consent decree triggers at midnight. If these filings aren't time-stamped by the court before the clock turns, injunction authority defaults back to the agency. And they'll bury it again. Yes, Nadine said, and bury more people with it. They reached a sealed chamber. Inside, an electronic ledger logged every enforcement action she had initiated in the past year. Each one represented a reform forced into existence because she had moved first, before the system could stall. This isn't just policy, she said quietly. It's a contract with every citizen who's been pulled over and silenced. My signature is on that decree. If I miss this deadline, I become complicit. Vanya swallowed. Then we don't miss it.
We don't.
Nadine affirmed. She lifted the sealed documents, held them against her chest for a single, grounding breath, then set them into the lockbox. The mechanism sealed with a dull, final click. The oath wasn't symbolic. It was enforceable. And tonight, with each passing mile on the highway, the clock was closing in. Nadine opened her center console and withdrew a small, matte black device no larger than a car fob. It bore no manufacturer logo, only an etched federal seal and a 6-digit authentication code that refreshed every few seconds. She pressed her thumb against the sensor. A soft blue light pulsed once. A tone chimed gently through the car speakers, not from her phone, but through an encrypted channel routed directly into the vehicle's comm system. The dashboard screen flickered, then populated with a real-time data stream, live patrol telemetry, body cam feed indicators, and incident queue statuses for multiple districts. One feed flagged red. District C-2. High variance pattern detected. She spoke quietly, more to the record than to herself. Variance has breached oversight threshold. A neutral voice, automated, calm, responded through the vehicle audio. Compliance review authorization standing. Field engagement may activate direct federal relay. Nadine tapped the fob again. The dashboard returned to normal. The device powered down, its blue light extinguishing as if it had never been active. Vanya's voice echoed in memory from earlier. "Does it ever bother you that you see what others can't?" Nadine had replied simply, "What I see wasn't given. It's my responsibility to use." A gust of wind rattled the windshield now, pulling her fully back into the present. The radio crackled with Walsh's voice, distorted under pressure. "Dispatch, confirm additional units. Driver is continuing non-compliance." The indicator on her dashboard flickered, this time not by her activation but automatically. Body cam relay. Active. The system had recognized her presence, even though the troopers had not. And on the shoulder of US 19 North, the real confrontation was about to begin. Years before she wrote a single doctrine or stood in the courtroom, Nadine Price had been just a college senior headed home for Thanksgiving. Her brother Caleb drove the family sedan, taillight intact, registration up to date, both of them singing along to the radio when flashing lights appeared behind them. They pulled onto the shoulder. No explanation was given for the stop. The officer never asked where they were headed, never took Caleb's license from his hand. Instead, he ordered him out of the car before his seatbelt was even off. Caleb complied. Nadine, 18 then, leaned forward from the passenger seat. "Officer, is something wrong?" The officer didn't respond. He shoved Caleb against the hood, cuffed him, and began searching his pockets. Caleb didn't resist. He didn't speak. They both knew that silence was the safest option. But silence didn't save him. The officer unholstered a small folding knife he claimed had been found in Caleb's jacket pocket. It wasn't Caleb's, and they said so. The officer ignored them. Backup arrived. Caleb was detained for intent to conceal a weapon, processed, and held for 12 hours. Charges were later dropped, in the interest of judicial economy. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, but the damage stayed. That night remained sealed in Nadine's mind, not as a memory, but as evidence. She obtained the public records as soon as she entered law school. She studied the policy that had allowed the stop. A single line buried in enforcement procedures. Officers may initiate discretionary exits if believed necessary for safety, subject to individual judgment. Individual judgment had cost her brother a future he never fully reclaimed. That clause would become the first policy she ever rewrote, not out of vengeance, out of duty. Law school taught her the language of justice, but it was the silence in the margins that taught her how justice failed. During her first year, Nadine spent nights in the Civil Rights Archive, studying thousands of traffic stop affidavits. At first, she read them academically. Then she began to recognize patterns, nearly identical phrases appearing in case after case. Driver exhibited nervous behavior. Officer believed immediate action was required. Discretionary safety exit authorized. The words that had justified her brother's arrest were not unique. They were structural, institutional, legalized ambiguity masquerading as officer safety. One evening, she presented her findings to a constitutional law professor known for his exacting standards. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked a single question. Do you plan to argue against these policies, or do you plan to author the ones that replace them? I plan to eliminate the ones that cause harm, she replied. That isn't litigation, he said. That's architecture. She understood what he meant. A courtroom victory corrected a past injustice. A drafted directive prevented future ones. Power was not in the argument. It was in the authorship. Whoever wrote the rules dictated the limits of force, scope, and consequence. From that moment, Nadine stopped aiming to win cases. She aimed to control frameworks. She interned with the Civil Remedies Bureau and later served as special counsel under a federal monitor overseeing nationwide police consent decrees. She became known not for courtroom theatrics, but for turning ambiguous protocols into enforceable statutes. The system didn't fear her because she challenged it. It feared her because she wrote it. And tonight, on that roadside shoulder, officers were moments away from violating a doctrine crafted by the very person they assumed had no power at all. Patrol lights streaked across the highway shoulder as a second cruiser pulled up. Sergeant Amir Patel, number 631, stepped out, composed, scanning the scene. Walsh pointed decisively at Nadine's vehicle. Driver refused exit, Walsh said, loud enough for the dash cam. Possible concealment. Patel kept his voice neutral. What articulable threat is identified? She wouldn't comply, Walsh replied. That alone is not threat under directive, Nadine said, hands visible on the wheel. Walsh ignored both. Unlock the door. I do not consent to entry, Nadine responded. State the threat indicator. Walsh wedged his flashlight against the window. The glass flexed. Patel stepped in. Trevor? Slow down. This is a compliance route. Walsh keyed his mic. Dispatch, initiating protective sweep. The phrase triggered immediate tension. A K-9 unit arrived seconds later. Trooper Kellum released the dog to circle the vehicle. One sharp bark. Alert, Walsh declared. Patel shook his head. That is not a confirmed pattern. Walsh opened the passenger door, reached into the glove box, and retrieved a plastic bag. Sealed. Pre-tagged. Nadine remained calm. That compartment was closed. Your body cam will show you placed that evidence. Walsh sealed the bag hastily. Patel's eyes locked on the unfilled chain of custody form. Evidence E147B logged, Walsh said. Without signature, Nadine replied. Procedural fabrication. Walsh stepped behind her door. Driver, step out. You are under arrest. Nadine unlatched her seatbelt and exited on her own. I am submitting under protest. This arrest is unlawful. Walsh cuffed her wrists. Cameras recorded everything. Patel's voice was low but firm. You need supervisory authorization. My discretion is enough, Walsh snapped. It isn't, Nadine said, turning so the dash cam could see her face. Retrieve the red identification card in my wallet. You are about to understand jurisdiction. Traffic had slowed to a crawl. Phones recorded in silence. As Walsh secured the cuffs, a dispatch alert came through, calm, automated, irreversible. Compliance authority detected on scene, initiating federal relay. And in that moment, the arrest no longer belonged to the officers. It belonged to her. Nadine stood beside the cruiser, cuffs tight around her wrists, the reflective strip on the asphalt casting a pale light at her feet. Her posture remained steady, not submissive, not defiant, simply anchored in certainty. Sergeant Patel, she said again, her tone clear but devoid of emotion. Inside my wallet is a red identification card. You will read it aloud for the record." Walsh stepped forward quickly. "No one's reading anything. She's in custody." Patel didn't move. His eyes were on Nadine. "What card, specifically?" She met his gaze. "Directive Authority Credential. Issued by the Attorney General's Civil Remedies Bureau. It identifies the author of the Vehicle Stop and Search Directive, Section 12.8.1. The words hung in the air. Walsh scoffed. "You expect us to believe you wrote our policy?" Nadine didn't turn toward him. She addressed Patel only. "Your body cam is active. This is your opportunity to confirm or deny legal jurisdiction." Patel stepped toward the open car door. Walsh moved to intercept. "Sergeant." Patel raised a hand. Not aggressive, not dramatic, just a measured refusal to be interrupted. He reached inside the vehicle and retrieved the wallet from the console. It was simple, black leather, no ornamentation. Inside, a red card sleeve was marked with a single embossed seal. Patel slid the card out. His brows pulled together the moment he saw the masthead. Walsh stepped closer, peering at the card over his shoulder. "What is that?" Patel didn't answer immediately. His body cam blinked steadily as he read the text quietly, lips moving without sound. Nadine remained still, gaze forward. Patel finally spoke, not to Walsh but to the camera. "Attorney General's Office, Civil Remedies Bureau, Special Counsel, Directive Author Authority, Section 12.8.1. Walsh's reaction wasn't verbal. It was the sound of his breath catching, caught clearly by the mic that was still streaming live. The policy he had just violated was hers. Patel held the red card in both hands now, as if it were evidence, not against her, but against himself and every officer present. His body cam captured the embossed federal seal, the authorization code, and beneath it, the line that mattered most. Primary Architect Vehicle. Stop and Search Directive 12.8.1. All state patrol jurisdictions subordinate to authority of issuer. Walsh stared at the card, his voice low. "That doesn't mean anything out here. Policy authors don't control field stops." Nadine turned slightly, just enough that the cruiser headlights lit her face. "Directive authors control the boundaries of lawful conduct, and as of the moment you initiated this arrest, you placed yourself outside those boundaries." Walsh began to speak, but Patel cut in, calm, composed, irreversibly changed. "Trooper Walsh," Patel said, voice now fully for the record. "Body cam Axon BC 631A capturing. You are detaining the issuing authority of the enforcement directive you are required to follow." Kellum, still holding the canine leash, paused mid-step. The dog quieted, sensing the shift. Nadine continued, voice clear and steady. Section 4.2 specifies that any officer initiating a detention of the directive author is required to cease direct contact immediately, pending supervisory transfer and compliance review. That clause exists to prevent retaliation against oversight officials. Patel lowered the card. His posture straightened, not in aggression, but in alignment with duty. "Per Section 4.2, he said, use of restraints on the directive author is prohibited once identification is verified." Walsh exhaled sharply. "You can't be serious." Patel looked at him without blinking. "Remove the cuffs." The bystanders watching didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The silence itself was a verdict. Walsh hesitated, but his hand moved to the cuffs. Nadine's voice was quiet. "Officer Patel, after the restraints are removed, you will open my briefcase. There is a printed copy of the directive. Read the highlighted paragraph aloud." And in the distance, multiple incoming sirens began to converge, not for enforcement, but for correction. Miles away, in a dimly lit newsroom, investigative journalist Lena Ortiz adjusted her headset and pulled up the compliance dashboard she had been monitoring all night. She wasn't watching traffic reports like the public. She was watching patterns, and one pattern was flashing red. District C2, variance spike, 312% above baseline. Lena spoke into her recorder. Compliance alert triggered at 2341. Multiple discretionary stops within enforcement-enabled corridor. Same trooper ID recurring, badge 742. Her phone buzzed with an automated data packet, time-stamped exactly at the moment Nadine's body cam relay went active. FedCom alert, live audit uploaded. Consent decree authority engaged. Lena leaned back, eyes narrowing. Someone just went live under the decree. Her editor's voice crackled through the line. Ortiz, if this is another decoy, we can't risk premature publication. It's not a decoy, she replied. A compliance author is on scene. That's the only way a live audit would trigger at Tier 1 classification. The editor hesitated. A policy author? In the field? Lena pulled up historical cases. Last time this happened was during the Monroe Consent Decree entry. Same pattern. Forced stop. High variance district. Silence before exposure. Her cursor hovered over a cluster of prior complaints tied to Trooper Walsh. Complaints dismissed due to lack of sustained evidence. Now, tonight, body cam footage was streaming directly beyond district servers, into federal custody. Lena activated a secondary recorder. Beginning time-stamped review for publication. Subject, District C2 discretionary stop. Potential systemic breach. Outside her window, city lights stretched into the distance. Somewhere out there, an entire state system had just shifted, without a single press conference, without warning. This wouldn't be a story about misconduct. This would be a story about structure collapsing from the top down. Lena's eyes locked on the feed, and as the audit portal refreshed, she saw the name appear under Initiating Authority. Price, Nadine E. Primary Directive Author. On the audit dashboard, new files populated under Incoming Evidence Automatic Sync. The system wasn't pulling from rumor or witness accounts. It was ingesting the department's own communications. Lena clicked the first attachment. Email, SHP District C2 Internal. Subject, Q3 Enforcement Expectations. From Lieutenant Conrad, District Supervisor. To all units, performance metrics must be raised going into grant cycle week. Stops are the primary indicator. Voluntary compliance is secondary. Show proactive engagement. Lena scrolled. Another email. Units averaging fewer than 15 discretionary stops per shift will be flagged for remedial evaluation. She opened a spreadsheet. File name, SHPKPIQ3 2025.XLSX. It displayed a chart correlating overtime pay spikes with enforcement periods. Color-coded. Target lines in red. Trooper Walsh topped the list for productivity. Lena hit record. District emails show quota-like directives disguised as performance metrics. Financial incentives tied to stop volume. Overtime payouts double during discretionary enforcement windows. Her phone chimed again. New file. Bodycam auto transcript. Digital. Keyword trigger. Directive author. She played it. Walsh's voice came through. Policy authors don't control field stops. Then Patel. Bodycam capturing. You're detaining the issuing authority. Lena exhaled sharply. They didn't know who she was until identification. She clicked another metric tab, this time focusing on financial entries. A column labeled Projected Federal Reimbursement, 23 U.S.C. Section 402, glowed in green. If stops increased during grant windows, funding increased proportionally. Lena leaned closer to the screen, voice tightening. This isn't about enforcement. It's about revenue. Behind her, muted televisions began picking up chatter from scanner feeds. Live compliance event unfolding. Body cam synced to federal. Lena's fingers were steady as she saved the files. The system wasn't cracking. It was being exposed. And this exposure wasn't accidental. It was engineered. By the very person standing on that roadside. Lena filtered the spreadsheet by funding source. Each enforcement spike aligned perfectly with a grant disbursement period under Federal Highway Safety Incentive Program, 23 U.S.C. Section 402. As stop counts rose, so did reimbursement amounts, overtime payouts, equipment stipends, training bonuses. These weren't random numbers, they were revenue triggers. She opened the most recently uploaded file. Memo, confidential, do not circulate. From SHP Finance Director to Command Staff. If discretionary enforcement numbers drop below minimum threshold, we risk triggering audit flags that could jeopardize federal funds. Maintain volume until compliance review next quarter. Lena narrowed her eyes. They linked stops to funding stability. Her assistant Raphael joined her at the screen. That sounds like quota policing. It's more than quotas, Lena said. This is financial dependency. The district survives on stop revenue. Without it, their grants collapse. And the person they just cuffed, she controls the grant gates. Raphael looked at her. You're saying she can cut their funding stream, Lena said, voice now low with realization. Not as a threat, as a mandated enforcement role. A notification appeared at the top of the screen. Federal Compliance Alert. Sovereign Authority Trigger Proximity. Authorization pending. Raphael stepped back instinctively. What is Sovereign Authority Trigger? It's the threshold for federal override, Lena replied. It occurs only when the directive author is obstructed while executing compliance duties. She clicked to view jurisdiction structure. A flowchart unfolded. State Patrol, district offices, AG oversight boxes. At the top, one box hovered alone. Sovereign Compliance Entity Authority supersedes state structure, grants power to suspend, audit, or restructure entire enforcement agencies. Under it, a single name, Price, Nadine E. Lena didn't speak this time. She didn't need to. The motive wasn't just money. It was control. And the system had just attacked the one person who controlled it. The patrol radios erupted all at once. Control to all District C2 units. Cease discretionary engagement. Compliance override protocol engaged. Stand by for federal transfer. Walsh froze mid-step. Patel turned sharply toward his cruiser. The dashboard screen had changed without anyone touching it. Local interface replaced by a black screen with a single gold seal. Unit lockdown. Federal Compliance Portal active. Authority override. Price, Nadine E. All actions are now legally binding under Consent Decree Monroe v. SHP 1:23-CV1173. Patel read the screen aloud, voice steady. Authority override. Sovereign jurisdiction engaged. Walsh shook his head. This is a glitch. This is some trick. Nadine spoke softly, not to Walsh, but to the record streaming live. Under Section 7 of the Consent Decree, the sovereign compliance entity holds authority not only to audit state patrol operations, but to suspend enforcement powers, terminate command structures, and freeze federal funding at immediate risk. Patel looked at her. You're not only the directive author. No, she replied. I am the appointed special master of the consent decree that governs this agency. As if on cue, the portal updated. Funding suspension notice drafted. Federal Review Panel notified. Interim receivership pending. Walsh backed away from the cruiser door. You can't suspend an entire patrol district. You already triggered it, Nadine said calmly. The moment you ignored compliance notice and restrained the Federal Enforcement Authority, automatic escalation engaged. Patel, eyes still locked on the screen, whispered, You control highway funding, training certification, operational legality. And tonight, Nadine continued, your agency documented its own misconduct in real time, sending it directly to my jurisdiction. Walsh's mic clicked without him touching it. All district commanders, came a voice from dispatch, shaky now. Stand by for emergency call from Attorney General's office. Compliance breach at level 1. This is not a drill. The sirens that approached now were different. Low, official, unhurried. They were not responding to Walsh. They were responding to her. And every officer present understood in that moment that authority in the state no longer flowed from their badges. It flowed from the woman they had just tried to arrest. By dawn, the incident had already moved through protected channels. It skipped public feeds and landed where pushback begins first, the Union. In an office lined with plaques and folded flags, Union President Carl Brackett faced two senior reps. A draft statement glowed on his screen. "We go first," Brackett said. "Control the frame before federal language hits." The comms aide read lines aloud. An activist posing as legal authority entrapped hard-working troopers in a staged confrontation. "We stand with officers against political interference." Brackett nodded. "Lean on safety and privilege. Make special masters sound like bureaucracy, not authority." A rep hesitated. "Credentials were verified on body cam." "Public doesn't know what that title means," Brackett replied. "We define it before she does." He looked into his webcam and recorded. "Our members faced a coordinated disruption by a federal bureaucrat who inserted herself into a lawful stop. We won't allow politics to rewrite the field." Local banners rolled within minutes. "Federal lawyer targets troopers. Activist attorney disrupts police operations." A quiet alert pinged Brackett's corner screen. "FEDCOM notice. Narrative logged. Counteraction pending under transparency mandate." He ignored it. On enforcement forums, the post spread fast. Patriot banners, calls to back the line. But under the noise, a simple thread kept reappearing. "If she's a fake, why did a supervisor read her directive card on camera?" The smear landed, but it didn't settle. The footage had already changed the ground. The institution pushed its version. The record pushed back. Nadine pulled into her driveway just past dusk. Two unmarked sedans sat at opposite ends of the block, engines idling, windows blacked out. They didn't move when she parked. They didn't need to. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown. We need to talk. Now." She didn't respond. Instead, she angled her phone so the camera captured the street. One of the sedans inched forward, timing its movement with hers. A voice came from behind. "Dr. Price." Two men in suits approached. No badges, no introduction. "We're here to ask questions regarding your conduct," the first said. "Identify your agency," Nadine replied. "We're liaison representatives," he answered carefully. "Not investigators, not sworn." "You're off record," she said, "meaning this is intimidation, not inquiry." They hesitated but stepped toward her porch anyway. "You've stirred concern," the second one said quietly. "People high up want this contained, quietly." For your safety, Nadine opened her front door, leaving it between them, a barrier and a statement. "Safety is ensured by compliance with law, not by silence." The taller man lowered his voice. "There are individuals who believe your role should remain advisory, not operational." Nadine met his eyes. "My role is defined by federal decree, not belief." He held her gaze for a beat, then stepped back. "Consider your next moves carefully." She closed the door with calm precision, not slamming, not dramatizing. A closing of jurisdiction. Her phone buzzed again. This time the message bore the federal security header. "FEDCOMINTERNAL. Surveillance detected. Asset protection protocol available. Initiate?" Nadine typed, "Stand by." She did not retreat because she was threatened. They were threatening her because she was advancing. The town hall was standing room only. Folding chairs filled. People lined the walls, some in uniform, some in church clothes, others with phones raised, streaming live. On one side, signs read, "Protect our troopers," and "We support law enforcement." On the other, "Rights are not optional. Stops shouldn't be death sentences." A retired officer stepped to the mic. "This federal interference is an assault on our frontline heroes," he said, earning applause. A local business owner followed. "My son has been stopped 3 times this month with no citation. If accountability is interference, maybe interference is overdue." The applause shifted. The room wasn't choosing sides. It was realizing it finally had one. Nadine stood near the rear, unseen, watching, not emotionally, but analytically. Division wasn't failure. Division was confirmation. The system was now under public review. The next speaker, a pastor, took the mic. "Law that is above scrutiny is not law. It is control. If Dr. Price wrote the rules that protect citizens, then she is not attacking order. She is restoring it." Murmurs moved through the room, not angry now, but unsettled. People weren't certain whose side they were on. They were, for the first time, certain the status quo would not return. A notification appeared on Nadine's secure device. "FedCom notice. Emergency oversight hearing set 0900 hours. She didn't stay for reaction. She stepped out the side door, her path already chosen. Not driven by rage, driven by mandate. By morning, this would no longer be a public debate. It would be a legal reckoning. The chamber was silent as officials filled the semicircle bench. Federal observers occupied the opposite row. Cameras stood ready behind glass. The gallery above was packed. Citizens, reporters, officers, all waiting for judgment. At exactly 9 o'clock, Attorney General Elaine Ross struck the gavel. "This emergency oversight hearing is now in session under Monroe Consent Decree authority. All testimony will be entered as binding compliance record." She looked directly at the table centered on the floor, where Nadine sat alone. No defense counsel, no entourage, only the architect of the law, present to enforce it. Across from her sat Trooper Walsh, Lieutenant Conrad, and the district chief, already sworn in. The clerk read the charge summary. Alleged violations: unlawful detention of federal authority, misuse of discretionary stop powers, fabrication of evidence, and breach of enforcement oath under Directive 12.8.1a. Stillness overtook the room. This was not accusation, it was consequence. A.G. Ross continued. Under decree protocol, the directive author appears not as witness but as governing authority in active enforcement. That line shifted everything. Nadine rose. Her voice carried with calm certainty. "I am Nadine Elizabeth Price, Special Master of Monroe v. SHP and primary architect of Directive 12.8.1. A ripple moved through the chamber. No outburst, only stunned recognition. She placed one hand on the sealed portfolio. "I am not here to testify against this agency," she said. "I am here to determine whether it continues to exist in its current form." No one moved. For the first time in the agency's history, enforcement power was not being questioned. It was being measured. The monitor descended from the ceiling. Dashcam footage appeared. Trooper Walsh at the window, flashlight raised. No cause stated. "Playback at original speed," Nadine instructed. The chamber watched in silence as the video displayed the forced entry, seizure of a pre-tagged evidence bag, and absence of any verbal justification. Nadine raised one finger. Clause 2.1. Officer must state lawful basis before initiating contact. None provided. Second finger. Clause 3.4. Exit orders prohibited without articulable threat. None cited. Third. Chain of custody must begin at point of discovery. Evidence was pre-sealed. The footage paused on the moment Walsh reached into the glove box. A.G. Ross asked, "Officer, did the driver give consent?" Walsh opened his mouth, closed it. Before he could respond, a new document appeared on screen, an internal email from Lieutenant Conrad. "We must maintain discretionary stop volume through the grant window. Trooper Walsh remains top producer." A quiet shift moved through the gallery. This was not rogue misconduct. It was systemic policy. Next, a financial spreadsheet appeared. SHPKPIQ 3-2025. It showed a direct correlation between increased stops and federal grant disbursements. Nadine spoke plainly. This is not law enforcement. This is revenue extraction, and it violated the directive in 27 measurable ways. Finally, the chain of custody log appeared. Blank. No signatures, no timestamps. A G. Ross addressed the panel. Does any member dispute that the directive author's written law was violated on record? No one spoke. The evidence did not prove misconduct. It proved design, and design falls under federal jurisdiction. The chamber remained still as Attorney General Ross looked down the line of officials. We proceed to immediate action. Each official stood one by one. District Chief Harold Pierce, Ross said, do you accept removal from command under federal receivership? Pierce didn't look up. I accept removal. Lieutenant Conrad, she continued, suspension pending federal prosecution. Conrad nodded once. No contest. Then the room turned to Trooper Walsh. Before the question was even posed, he rose. This was political. This was entrap. Nadine stood in the same moment, calm, controlled. The directive was authored to stop precisely this abuse, she said, and your actions activated its highest level of enforcement. A.G. Ross spoke firmly. Trooper Walsh, your badge is revoked. Federal charges will proceed under civil rights statute. Walsh's shoulders sank. The gallery held its breath, not in shock, but in finality. The clerk read the decision. Effective immediately, District C-2 is placed under federal receivership. All discretionary patrol authority is suspended. Funding is frozen pending compliance certification. There was no applause, no protest, only the sound of structures collapsing in silence. Nadine addressed the panel, not as a witness, but as the authority who would now rebuild. This was not a failure of individuals, she said. It was a system designed to profit from violation, and that system ends today. Attorney General Ross struck the gavel. The decision was not a recommendation, it was law. Change didn't arrive through speeches. It arrived through mandates, server updates, and signatures that rewrote the limits of power. At training headquarters, recruits faced a new slide on the projector. Directive 12.8.1, Compliance Integration. Officers must state legal clause before issuing any exit command. The instructor spoke plainly. If you cannot cite the law, you cannot act. Noncompliance isn't a mistake. It's termination. Patrol cars across the state received remote updates. Dashboards now displayed a mandatory prompt before lights could activate. Specify statutory basis for stop. Options. Articulable threat, court warrant. No other options available. Body cam systems were reprogrammed. If an officer failed to state the clause number allowed, recording would auto-flag the incident for review. Supervisors watched real-time dashboards as compliance scores began replacing stop quotas. In the funding portal, a new notice appeared. Grant access suspended. Pending civil rights certification. Authority listed. Price, N.E. Sovereign compliance entity. Across media networks, headlines appeared. State patrol placed under federal control after landmark decree. New law requires officers to prove legal basis before acting. Community town halls replaced protest lines. Instead of demanding reform, citizens submitted policy clauses of their own. Nadine's mandate had become public infrastructure. The law had not changed sides. It had finally been forced to choose one. The courthouse was nearly empty when Nadine approached the federal exhibit drop box. No cameras, no witnesses, just chilled air and the hum of the building settling into silence. She removed the final sealed envelope, the same one that began her journey down that highway. She held it for a brief moment, not as a symbol, but as a responsibility fulfilled. Then placed it into the slot. Timestamp. Logged. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes before the deadline. Her phone buzzed softly. Fedcom system. Exhibit received. Injunction activated. Funding suspension in motion. Another line appeared beneath it. Originating family notified. They request acknowledgement only. Nadine typed one word. Acknowledged. She stepped outside. The air was cool, steady. No applause waited for her, no camera flash. Justice, in its truest form, didn't arrive with noise. It arrived in forceful quiet, quiet that signaled finality. Outside the courthouse, a flag moved slightly in the night breeze. For years, that flag represented an institution that claimed authority. Tonight, it represented one that had finally been held accountable. Nadine didn't stop to reflect on victory. She did not indulge in relief. She simply walked down the steps, steady as ever. Her work was not done because she had won. It was done because the law now stood where it had always been intended, above individuals, beyond bias, and bound to truth. A quiet stillness settles over the final frame. No music, no narrator, only a written declaration fades onto the screen. Laws do not fail because they are weak. They fail when no one is willing to stand on them. The voiceover is calm, steady, the same tone Nadine used from the beginning, measured, controlled, rooted in purpose. Tonight, a system didn't change because someone shouted louder than authority. It changed because someone was the authority and refused to surrender that truth. The screen fades to black. A final line appears in bold, centered. If you've ever been stopped, silenced, or pressured to comply without cause, your experience matters. Comment below. What protection should be written into law next? Your words may become the next directive. The last frame holds just long enough for viewers to act. No dramatic music swell, just intention. Justice does not invite applause. It invites participation.